Hey everyone, welcome to another GMath Club Saturday session. I'm here with two of my friends from University of Michigan Ross School of Business. So when I was doing live videos in the last couple of weeks, I kept getting questions from the international students about, like uncertainties, things that are happening, and general international stuff like visa, OPT, CPT, and many other alphabets. So I thought like some of my friends who also go to the Ross School of Business and have been through that process, same as me, we could get together and talk about how that process looks like for international students. So before going any further, I wanted to introduce you guys to Avinav and Ranjan. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Avinav, why don't you go first?
Sure. Yeah. Hey everyone. My name Avinav. I'm from Delhi, and before Ross, I used to work at an advisory consulting firm, Gartner. This was also in Gurgaon, and like obviously, I'm Souvik's and Ranjan's classmate at Ross. Just graduated. I'll be joining Deloitte Consulting hopefully soon, but let's see. I don't. We'll figure that out.
All right. So we will talk about that pause and that last thing in just a little bit. But before that, Ranjan, why don't you go ahead too?
Hey, hey guys, hi everyone. I'm Ranjan. I'm also Souvik and Avinav's batchmate. I'm originally from India. I was working in a fintech startup back in Bangalore before coming to Ross. Uh, After Ross, I am planning to join in Amazon as a product manager, along with Souvik, and we'll be moving to Seattle soon.
Yeah, I have already moved to Seattle. Okay, speak for yourself. But dude, don't just don't go to Belltown. Move somewhere better. But anyway, so yeah, no, I think we have started to get questions already, so we'll get to them soon. But I just wanted to first go through, like starting with like the MBA application. How did you guys do it? And I mean, I know your stories. I know some of your very non-traditional stories too, Ranjan. So yeah, so just briefly outline how did you land up at Michigan Ross? Why did you land up at Michigan Ross, etc. Ranjan, do you want to start this one?
I can take this one. Uh, so, how did I land at Michigan Ross? Good question. It was a long and arduous journey, the whole application process. I honestly underestimated that a lot. I thought like clearing GMAT is the biggest thing, but everything starts after GMAT. So the whole application process was difficult, and I learned a lot of things along the way. Uh, I generally approached it by figuring out what my target schools are. Uh, it revolved around both the schools that I can get into, and the other ones was the schools I want to get into. So I shortlisted about 7 to 8 schools in the top 15 schools across different categories. Two of the schools in the first seven ranked, then like 3 to 4 schools in 7 to 12, and then like two schools in 12 to 15. So once and I selected those schools basically on where where I would fit in based on my career goals. I wanted to be in either tech or consulting. So I focused on schools which are really good in those functional areas, rather than going into a school which is heavy into finance, let's say Columbia. Um, so that was once I had those target schools, then it was all about dividing those schools into first round applications and second round applications. So I picked 3 schools wherein I applied in the first round, picked up the rest 4 schools wherein I applied in the second round.
Yeah.
Uh, the whole application writing and interview process was I used consultants' help across the whole process, and then eventually it turned out well. I had a couple of admits from NYU Stern and Ross. I had to pick one of those, but uh, here I thought like Ross fits in better with my career goals, so I chose to come to Ross.
Awesome. I'm glad you did, and I think in hindsight everything worked out really well.
Yeah.
What about you, Avinav? What's been your journey like?
Yeah. Yeah, my journey started pretty late, like in the sense that I didn't apply to any round one. I didn't meet any round one deadlines. So most of 2018, I was focused on,
What a
uh,
lazy man.
yeah, that's how I am. But most of 2018, I was focused on my job. Like I was on a trying to get this promotion, and I found out about that in October. And then I was like, okay, now I need to figure out the next step in my career. And
Right.
that's the point I'm like, okay, like always knew that I did want to go for an MBA, and that's the point I decided, okay, this has to happen. So obviously October was too late for round one, and then I very similar goals as Ranjan, like wanted to be in this tech consulting space. So I chose schools based on that. Ross was a natural choice given that like it's got a pretty strong presence with all the consulting and all the tech firms, and I chose a few other schools based on those metrics. And so I started the process seriously around November. I was able to. I didn't use any consultants. It was mostly a family effort, since a lot of people in my family have been through the process very recently. So like put together essays, refined my goals, took the help, edit my essays, and put that together. I actually had given GMAT well early in 2018, but the score was not. I felt was not good enough for getting into schools like Ross. So I actually gave GMAT a day after the Ross deadline. I got the score and I figured, okay, like everything's finally come together. Like my essays were in a good shape. GMAT, I finally had the score, and like also managed to get into the same schools, Ross and Stern. Also chose Ross because I felt like it aligned much better with the goals I have. Yeah.
Yeah, weren't you like back in those days? Weren't you like getting on GMAT Club and like, hey, I want to do this, I want to do that. I'm picking between Stern and Ross,
Yep.
and what can I like, do? Just come to Ross. Like, why this thing?
Yeah.
Whole thing? Didn't that happen with you?
Yeah, that was me March, April 2018 when I was figuring out which way to go. I was anyway leaning towards Ross. Like I was going to all the Ross events in
Right.
Delhi, and I never showed up for any of the Stern events. So I mean, it's kind of already said, but like with Stern, like I have some friends who had been to Stern, and like a few years back, I went met them. I spent like time living with them in Stern, so I was kind of also excited about that. Like New York City is obviously fantastic,
Right.
but then I finally made the choice based on like I really started like you guys, for example. I met you all around March, April, and then I was like, yeah, I'm just doing it. The people are fantastic, school's fantastic, and I'll be able to do everything I want to do. It makes
Yeah,
perfect sense.
that was a good save, Avinav. This video needs to be age appropriate. Um, Okay, so yeah, no, okay, that's awesome. So I wanted to get into like the meat of the session today because I think the general questions is around the international student experience.
Yep.
So Avinav, I'll start with you. Can you explain to me like CPT, OPT, H1B? I mean, I know these things too, and so does Ranjan, but let's just quickly run through what international students have to do before we go into the specific challenges.
Yeah. So CPT stands for Curriculum Practical Training. So that's the work authorization international students get for the internships.
Right.
OPT stands for Optional Practical Training. That's well, it's for 1 year, and then if you are going through a STEM degree, which most top business schools are now, you get 2 years. You get a 2 year extension. So the STEM OPT gives you 3 year work authorization after you graduate. So
Right.
these are driven by the school and not the company. So it's pretty straightforward. You just have to follow the instructions the school gives you. I mean, it's still with H1B, it's completely company driven. You have a lawyer assigned to you, so it's probably like way more relaxed. With OPT, you still need to be on OPT and CPT. You still need to be on top of things. But does that answer your question, or is there
Yeah,
something?
yeah, no, for sure. I think my question was around the yeah, so basically getting a lowdown on what these things are. But for both for your internships and your full-time roles, even though for internships you don't really need anything from the company, like you mentioned, right? Like you can just get CPT based on a job description. I don't think you can get a CPT if you don't have a job. I
No,
mean,
you can't.
I think OPT, because it's optional, you can get it started without getting a job, and you can still look for a job.
You're right.
But CPT you cannot. But then, even then, during your summer recruiting process, and Ranjan, let's start with you on this. You can't really recruit for every single company on campus, right? So can you give me, and I can add on this one too. I'm sort of moderating this session, but I'm sure to step in as well. But can you give me a quick overview of what are some of the companies that you did apply for your summer and managed to get interviews or did not get interviews? You don't have to go down the lane of disappointment. You can just share the
Yeah.
successes. But and also like which companies you couldn't apply because you're just not eligible because you were an international student, and how was that expectation versus reality moment?
Got it. So I'll start with the generic, uh, how the industry looks like for an MBA candidate. Uh,
Yeah,
it's something like the three biggest industries that hire MBAs are consulting, tech, and finance.
right.
Then there are other industries which are smaller in nature and which hire like few MBA candidates. That can be healthcare, or let's say even like subsections within finance, let's say PE or VC, right? Uh,
Right.
so, but essentially, consulting, tech, and finance are the three biggest industries. Uh, I was particularly focused on the consulting and technology side of it. Uh, Now, within consulting, the good news is that almost all companies hire internationals, barring a few companies here and there. Last year, I think Deloitte rolled out a policy wherein they decided not to hire internationals, but I think that had, I'm not sure, but I think that had something related to do with a STEM course or not, but I think that's sorted now as well. Uh, so the good thing is that within consulting, almost all companies hire internationals, unless it's a very small boutique consulting firm, which frankly there aren't many. So if you're looking at the top 6 7 consulting firms, EY, Deloitte, AT Kearney, McKinsey, Bain, BCG, all of them hire internationals. So that was something which is a saving grace for all internationals. Uh,
Yeah,
Within,
EY specifically.
yeah, and within tech, again, the good thing is that all bigger tech firms hire internationals, like some of the bigger ones.
Except Facebook, I think they hire international engineers but not MBAs.
Exactly. So if you look at like Apple's and Microsoft, Google's, Amazon, all of them hire internationals, and as Shoaib pointed out, Facebook hire internationals, but just for engineering roles. There were definitely some disappointments within tech. The companies that I really wanted to get into, but I couldn't. Uh,
Yeah,
I can think about Slack. I can think about LinkedIn,
sure.
Facebook. These are amazing companies to work at, and they don't hire internationals right out of like an MBA school.
Yeah,
They might hire them later in their career paths, but not fresh out of MBA. Uh, and even within tech, I have a tech startup experience back in India. So I was looking at a lot of fintech startups as well.
right.
There also I found some of the companies which weren't hiring internationals because they're very small in nature. They would hire like 2 to 3 or 5 MBAs per year, right? And they don't have very strong policies around hiring internationals, and you need to like network your way in through and like really establish your value if you want these companies to get to sponsor you. Uh,
Right.
so if your career goals revolve around big tech companies and consulting companies or big investment banks, then I think uh, the impact of, I mean, there are relatively very few companies that won't sponsor you, and you would have like a good variety of options to choose from.
Okay. Okay. I mean, I have a couple of thoughts. I mean, okay, so just for the people who are watching, Ranjan is an optimistic person. Like, I'm pretty cynical. So for me, the experience was a little bit different. Like, I felt that, like, every single company that I couldn't apply to, I felt like I'm getting a discounted experience, you know?
Yeah,
Like for example, even in consulting, you mentioned that it's not a big deal. Sure, like, but what if like MBB is hard to get, right? I mean, it's super hard. None of us three got it, right? And then if you go beyond MBB, EY feels like, okay, I'm trying to be too honest here, I guess, but EY might doesn't have the ring to it. But if you look at these firms, like Accenture doesn't sponsor, KPMG doesn't sponsor,
Yeah.
Deloitte doesn't sponsor, PwC like only sponsors in the Middle East or something.
yeah,
Uh, so I felt like, okay, even in consulting, and you have like ZS and like other firms who come on campus,
yeah.
and there was like this rumor that BCG will stop sponsoring. Anyway, whatever. But I felt like this was pretty pervasive in other stuff as well. But Avinav, I'm curious to know what you think.
About companies that sponsor. So, I mean, as soon
Yeah,
as
like as an
we,
international student, what were you really, what was like this expectation versus reality thing?
the expectation, I mean, I already had a sense that not every company on campus will be interviewing me because I need sponsorship. So, but as soon as I came on campus, it was pretty clear which are the companies I can target.
Right.
So, like, since consulting and the tech digital arm of those consulting firms was my target, I knew that okay, MBB, Deloitte, EY, few other big consulting firms are on the cards, and that I was comfortable with those choices. In terms of tech, also I was aware about, I mean, except for Facebook, which you mentioned, there are many other big tech companies with sponsor, and we're not even talking about some of the smaller companies that come on campus. For example, I
Yeah.
remember there's Varsity Tutors, there were a few other smaller firms which was not on campus, but I remember getting emails from them, these smaller companies, in January, February, that we have this role. I mean, obviously this process starts very late as compared to on-campus recruitment, but there are companies. So probably in terms of optimistic, pessimistic, I'm leaning slightly towards Ranjan. I mean, in terms of, and this is obviously 2018, in terms of what's happening right now, obviously situation is changing. Like, I got recruited for Deloitte, but Ranjan already mentioned, Deloitte is no longer sponsoring. And the year before, our strategy and was sponsoring, and they stopped for our year. So I
Right.
mean, right now, obviously, things are not looking good. I mean, it's moving in the wrong direction in that sense, but who knows what it might be like. I think most people listening to this might be class of 23, 24,
Yeah.
and things might be different by then. They might be moving in the right direction. Yeah.
Totally. I mean, look, I mean, it's hard to say what's right and wrong, to be honest. Like, I mean, for some people, this is probably a good, I don't know. But I did feel, though, that our class of 2020 was really, really lucky and like did really well in recruiting.
Yep.
I think we had a ton of like top consulting recruiting, a ton of tech recruiting, and I think, I mean, I'd going to say that we did better than class of 2019, right? Like in terms of just the sheer volume of companies and offers. But at the same time, like if you look at the next class, I think they were for internship. They were doing really well. I saw a lot of like McKinsey, Bain, BCG offers.
Yep.
They were like pouring in, but then this whole thing started, and sort of things became a little bit tricky. But let's chat about that a little bit. So, what's the current? I know you guys are. I think especially you, Ranjan, are live at the Yard, which is, by the way, for people who don't know, is like this place where a lot of MBAs stay together. So, what's the current situation, and how has this impacted recruiting in general? I'm only talking about COVID. I'll get to H1 and visa issues in a bit, but tell me more about what's your thought on that.
I think it's very industry specific again.
Yeah,
So I'll talk about like how COVID has impacted full time recruiting for like different industries. I'm not
sure.
talking about like potential recruiting, but like folks who already had the offers, right, or folks who might be recruiting right now. Uh, so within tech, the good thing is that I haven't seen a lot of impact of COVID in
Yeah.
terms of
Okay,
delay.
some of them have actually thrived. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but some of them have actually thrived in this environment.
And exactly right, like the product that I am going into on Amazon, they are really excited to launch that as soon as possible because uh, COVID basically helps that product going to the market. uh, so tech companies are not negatively impacted by COVID. Everyone is on track to join on their given timelines. Within consulting, there's definitely an impact, but it's sort of a mixed impact. I think even consulting is looking pretty optimistic. I've spoken to people who are working in the companies, and they have a lot of projects to work at right now. The projects are related to change management, COVID response, cost cutting in supply chains, etc. So there is work at consulting firms as well.
Yeah.
However, there has been an impact. Folks have seen delays in joining. Abhinav is one example. So I'll let Abhinav talk about that. But there have been some delays in joining, but I haven't seen offers rescinded, barring one or two cases
Yeah.
in consulting. Uh, but if you talk about other specific industries, let's say airline industry or travel industry, industries that are really hit by COVID, there
Yeah.
you can definitely see an impact of COVID. I've
Yeah.
seen offers rescinded. Uh, I've seen like offers rescinded in our MBA class. but I haven't seen any internationals impacted by that because those are not necessarily the industries that internationals are targeting at the first place.
Yeah, no, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Also, like this is like this weird cushioning. I have seen a lot of tech layoffs, but and offer rescinding, but the international students were like nice and safely cushioned because those were like smaller companies and they wouldn't sponsor international students anyway. And
Exactly.
the big tech companies that international can actually get into have thrived during this environment and haven't been impacted. But Avinav, tell me about your experience too.
Yeah.
When are you
No.
joining
So
Deloitte? Are you joining Deloitte at all?
yeah.
Sorry,
Hopefully, fingers crossed.
I'm making joke out of your misery, man. I'm really sorry.
No, I'm fine. Like made peace with it. Like yeah. So I'll be starting at Deloitte in January 2021, and I've heard it's not just Deloitte. Like a few other companies, Bain, BCG, KPMG also have people joining in January. Oh, I just see a funny comment.
Yeah, no, so this guy is one of my old friends. I'm gonna put this comment up. So he was like,
No, I
GMAT.
know him. I was in school with this guy.
Yes, come on, Devansh. No, Ross is very good. Okay, I
Duke
hope
is
you're
terrible.
having fun.
Everyone knows that.
Yeah,
Yeah. So in terms of consulting, obviously impacted. Like, I mean, whatever I'm stating is obviously out there in the news that business is down for these firms, and like everyone knows, Deloitte had layoffs. Every other firm is also expecting layoffs. That said, in terms of offers being rescinded, that's not happening. Like, Deloitte has been quite open, and again, it's out in the news that they're looking forward to people joining them, like
yeah.
starting September all the way up till Jan. There's some smaller consulting firms which are actually starting in April, so that's also happening. But yeah, like in terms of business, I think like obviously I can't speak on their behalf.
Yeah.
Like it's out there in the news that they're expecting things to start picking up again very soon. Yeah.
Let's talk about immigration a little bit. We are sort of, I think we have about 15, 20 minutes left.
Mm.
But let's talk about immigration a little bit because this week there was a lot of rumors and murmurs about, everything. Everything's gonna get banned. Everything's gonna get cancelled, and like we were all pretty anxious. I'm guessing. Like if you were not
Still
anxious,
are. Yeah.
I'm guessing you have really good nerves. So are you guys worried about that at all? Like what's up with that?
I mean, obviously worried, but there's nothing been confirmed yet. Like everything in the news right now is speculation. I think
Yeah,
the key thing we've heard is that like entry of H1B, L1, H4, all that will be barred.
yeah,
Which, considering all of us are in the US right now, I don't know if that really impacts us. But that said, like there's literally no confirmation from the government, so like it's practically impossible to comment on that.
yeah. So let me switch to a different question, and let's start with you, Ranjan. If you were, watching yourself right now, so you're sort of thinking of applying in either 2021 or 2022, um, would you would you apply? Would you postpone your MBA, do something else, go to a different place? What would you do?
Um, Applying in
Uh,
2021, right? So
2021 or 2020, just like in the near future,
in the
you know.
near future, right? That's a good question. Give me a second to think about it.
that's a very
Avinav,
good
if you
question.
have thoughts before Ranjan while he thinks about an optimistic response, you can go ahead.
No,
Exactly.
I'm also thinking right now. That's a pretty good
Okay,
question.
cool. So I think it depends on my career goals, to be very
Yeah,
honest. If I'm really sure that I want to be in tech, then I would go ahead and just apply. I honestly feel that immigration is an issue and can be an issue, but uh, folks working in big tech companies at relatively higher levels won't be impacted that much by it. And I have a feeling that it's very difficult to cut off immigration for folks who are doing postgraduate and relatively good level of postgraduate here in the US.
right.
Uh, I mean, intuitively, these people add a lot of value to the economy, and I think if sanity prevails, which it should,
Sure.
uh, although things don't look like it, but if sanity prevails, then MBA graduates should not be impacted that much. And with a lot of MBAs now turning into STEM course, I think the risk of not realizing your financial value of MBA has also reduced.
Hmm.
For example, our class at Ross, we don't have a STEM program, but our junior class have an option to turn into STEM. So that's
Right.
huge added value. So that whole
I
STEM,
mean, STEM OPT can be cancelled. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it can, but seeing that impact going into 2022, I don't think
probably. Right. Yeah.
that's that likely. But again, like these are all speculations, and you don't know. These are unprecedented times. Nobody can speculate, right? Like this is the first time this is ever happening in history. But like my best guess is that if I were doing it, and if I wasn't doing, if my opportunity cost of doing an MBA isn't that much back in India,
Right.
I still feel that the career opportunities in tech here, especially talking about tech, is really great. So I would just go ahead and do my MBA. The
Yeah.
only thing which would concern me deeply is that I would have to start online or offline, if
Right.
because a huge portion of that MBA is, meeting new people, spending time with them, and like growing as a person. And I am old school. I don't think Zoom calls and doing my MBA online would give me that sort of an MBA experience that I would have been looking for.
I
So
mean, University of Phoenix would disagree with you, but you
yeah,
know, I know what you mean. Yeah.
yeah, but if
Ab-
my MBA is starting online, and if I have to be online for the first year of my MBA, then I would be really wary of doing it, because a lot of like value that I got from my MBA was being around people and growing as a person, which I am.
I know about those values.
But if I am able to join like in person, then I would still go ahead and do my MBA. So that's my opinion.
Yeah.
Mm.
Avinav, I'll get to you too, but I think I'll just chime in, and I think it's a question of risk. And
Yeah.
I think Ranjan, you brought up something excellent, but you didn't really spend a lot of time on it. But I think it's a lot about your opportunity cost, right?
Yeah.
So let's take this hypothetical example. Let's say there are like 50 international students in this class of 100 students in a hypothetical business school, right? So if out of those 50 students, let's say 45 of them get a job, and out of those 45 who get a job, 40 of them have their visa issues sorted, which I think are realistic numbers. I don't think is that these are very far off. So if 40 out of 50 students get a, like, I don't know, like 150 grand job, that's like a 90% probability of 150. That sort of put your expected return or your expected salary after graduating from a class of 2023, 24 is 140 grand. And now, if you compare that with your life in India or life in China or life in Brazil, wherever you're coming from, if that's a significantly better life, then that risk might be worth it.
Yeah.
But if you're already making a lot of money in India and you already have a good life, and if you have the grad school bug or the MBA bug, and you want to do it because like you want to see the American or the international or the business school experience, then I'm not so sure, because like you're just the Zoom thing would be a big damper on your experience, and I think people are not going to go to Skeeps and in such a large volume this year or next year, even if school opens up. I think we'll still continue to be a little bit wary. So experience might be a little bit discounted. The thing, though, that Avinav, I want to ask you the same question about
Yeah.
what would you do if you were here. But one thing that would be good to get your thoughts on is a lot of people sort of confuse doing a US MBA with living in the US, like long term.
Mm.
And I think those two are very, very different things, in
Mm.
my opinion. Because even if you get an H-1B, like you're out after 6 years, or I mean, unless you are fine with being on a green card application, and like like if you
Yeah.
like eat your chavanprash every day and you live till live till 200 years, you might be able to see your citizenship. It's
Yeah.
unlikely unless you get like other means to get there. Tell me your thoughts about the same question, but tell me also about the difference between doing an MBA in the US versus building a life in the
So,
US.
I mean, a lot of people apply to business schools and they might have these two goals at the same time, right? Like,
Yeah,
we want to study in
exactly.
the US and we want to work in the US long term and probably like get permanent residency and continue. So, obviously, there is like the worst case is that it does take 200 years and nobody's going to make it. But then there are ways, like, in terms of you probably have to hit the best case in every scenario. Like, you have to get the lottery in the first or second go. If you don't get that without STEM OPT, you're probably out anyway. Once you get that, then you have to get your employer to sponsor your green card. Once that happens, your H1B, you're not out after 6 years, like you mentioned. Your H1B will be renewed for one year at a time indefinitely. As of right now, that happens. And then there are different categories of the green card as well. If you're able to reach a certain level, like if you're like managerial, whatever, it's called EB1, then as an Indian also you can get a green card within the next 7 to 8 years, which is the current situation. Obviously, that number will only go up as demand increases and supply goes down. So the best case for you is, yes, you come to the US like your class of 23, and by late 2030s you're like have a green card. So you sorted. I mean, the caveat is your like life will be pretty miserable. Like you won't be able to make long-term decisions. Should I buy a house? Should I invest in retirement plans? What if I get kicked out? Like I know cases about people whose H1B didn't get renewed. So like there's a lot of uncertainty. So you have,
Example, right?
yeah, that's horrible. Like they got the lottery, they got H1B, they're working, they probably got promoted once, and like they pretty much saw it. They know they've specialized in something as well, and like life's looking pretty good, and it didn't get renewed. Like, and now that person is sitting somewhere in Southeast Asia. So I mean, that happens, and they didn't come in planning for that. So if you're ready, if you can make your peace with that level of uncertainty for maybe like almost 2 decades, then sure, go ahead, do it. But like I know what I have to do, and like love to hear your thoughts that you should have backup in the sense that, okay, like if worst case, if I have to go back to India, and why is that the worst case? Like going back to
No, it's
India,
not
like
the worst case. You just mentioned that that person is living in Southeast Asia. Man, I would love to live in Southeast
yeah,
Asia.
exactly, and that's just one case. I know someone else who ended up in from Deloitte, like worked at Deloitte for almost 4 years, 1 year OPT, 3 year H1B, didn't get renewed. Now sitting in London,
Not bad at all. That's
you,
I'm in London and I'm making like a 1% level salary. My life is really challenging.
yeah, in a sense, you could make an argument it's better. You're like 5 hours, 7 hours closer to home, right? Like if you're
Correct. And it's probably an easier path to citizenship, right? Like whatever.
exactly. So I think the key takeaway is like if you're obsessed about like I want to study in the US, I want to work in the US, and I want to become a US citizen at some point, then you should probably change that mindset. You should be open to
Yeah.
several different other options as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's super key here. Like, I think I sort of think that a lot of people have this mentality, and I think I had that too. Like, oh, if I don't get an H1B, my life's ruined.
Yeah,
Or
it's not.
oh, this MBA made no sense. This MBA was a complete waste of time. That's not true, man. I mean,
That's not.
anyway, Ranjan, did you have some thoughts on that? I'm going to go to user questions.
I think Avinav summed that up pretty well, so I'm good.
Yeah, awesome. Avinav is a summer. Okay, let's seek for some questions.
I saw something about consulting being non-STEM. I think we can address that pretty quickly. What's STEM?
Okay,
And
average salary of MBA passed out. Well, if you're
oh,
passed out, you're not making any money. It's generally like 150, 200. It's like it depends. I can go to like the company by company thing. It's just not going to be a good idea. But I think that's a good ballpark. What do you guys think?
150 is good, I guess.
Yeah, I think 140, 150, and
Plus
about
bonus.
Yeah, like bonus.
250 is the sign-on bonus on an average. Like it again depends on the companies. Like I've seen higher, I've seen lower. So
Yeah.
on average, 30 to 50 would be the sign-on bonus, and about 30 to 40 per year would be the annual bonus.
Right.
On top of 140.
And if you join Amazon, like you have some sweet stock that you're gonna see 3 years later, but it's gonna be sweet. Okay, cool. So, can you shed light on some of the careers that international students aren't considered for due to visa issues? For example, marketing. And that's a good question.
Yeah.
Marketing and CPG is actually, unfortunately, one of the industries where it's really, really hard to break into. I think I know like one company that sponsors international. It's Kraft Heinz.
Oh, yeah.
So just gonna quickly go through what I would recommend. I would recommend the tech role. You can get marketing roles in tech, build that credibility, and then move to CPG, which I think is a better path, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like Amazon has an RLDP program, Google has product marketing roles, Microsoft has product marketing roles. But curious to know what you guys think.
I agree with Shavik. And marketing roles in CPG is something which I understand why they're not hiring internationals.
Yeah,
Because as a marketing in CPG, you need to have a really good understanding of the customer base because you are sort of the P&L owner of the product, and
yeah,
having an international uh, understand that customer base is something which is difficult to expect from for someone who has just come into the country. So I
yeah,
understand why they're doing it, and as Shavik said, that product marketing is a really good proxy for that sort of a role. In terms of other industries that I can think of would be, let's say if you're interested in sales role. So sales is something which is difficult to crack as an international, as a functional area, which also makes sense because you need to understand the customer. You need to really connect with your customers to be a good salesperson, which is difficult to expect from an international at get go. Other roles that I can think of is the venture capital industry.
yeah,
um, Again, there you need to have a huge network with the entrepreneurs within the country, and as an international it's difficult to expect that from them.
yeah.
um, Other roles that I can think of which
Even things like private equity, investment banking, they
Yeah.
don't always sponsor, and they sponsor on a very case by case basis. Like consulting companies have a blanket rule. Like McKinsey, BCG, Bain, they sponsor. That's it.
yeah.
But a lot of shops, like PE shops, IB shops, they're very case by case. So they hire you over the summer. Getting a return offer is not guaranteed, and only if they like you, they will go to bat for you. If they don't like you, they will not sponsor you. So,
Exactly. Then
uh,
some of the tech startups might not sponsor you.
yeah.
Uh,
It's just that they can't afford it to
Yeah. Cost
that
money.
might change.
yeah.
It's not being able to afford the fee. The H1B fee is not that low. I mean, not that high, but it's like having the lawyer team and having this. It's just a process that you have to engage with. So it's a little tough.
But in startups, you can definitely go for like a case by case basis. If you're a
Yeah,
really good fit and if you can like explain them the value that you're going to add, then it might work out.
yeah, like
Yeah,
get my H1B through TaskRabbit or something.
exactly.
I'm
Yeah,
not.
these are the industries that I can think of which don't sponsor. I'm not sure if you guys want to add to that.
No, it's pretty
Other
much the same.
industries, I mean, I've seen airlines sponsoring, right? Like American, Delta, they I've seen them sponsoring.
Yeah.
Uh, a lot of different general management companies sponsor too, but a lot of general management companies don't sponsor as well.
Yeah.
So it sometimes it changes. Like for example, I think Dell used to sponsor for the summer, but they wouldn't sponsor for full time. Like weirdness, and these things also change year after year. So it's hard to put a finger on that. Avinav, anything?
No, those are all the companies I can think of. Like, and I have no idea about things outside tech and consulting. I don't know how banking works, but yeah, there
Yeah.
were a few general management companies, and those roles are pretty good actually. Like, people should look into them as well
Yeah.
when they're trying to figure out.
It's the okay, so it's also like business school applications. Like you think you're gonna, like round one is like Harvard, Wharton, and Stanford. By round two, Emory starts looking pretty good, you know. So it's the same thing.
Yeah.
I have enough question for you. Why are plenty of students choosing American business schools despite strict immigration policies in countries like Canada, Australia, Europe, which have generous immigration policies?
Hmm. I don't know. That's obviously I can only speak for myself
Yeah,
again, but I do feel like, I mean, Canada, Australia, I mean, US business schools in general, I don't want to just go ahead and say they're better, but they do, like, in my opinion, they're better. Like, it doesn't matter what the global rankings. I know Financial Times rankings, like, they have never made sense to me, but yeah, the US business schools and the opportunities they offer, and like many of these companies that we recruit for, these companies are American companies.
deeply
Like,
American.
you talk about consulting, you talk about tech. Like, I can only think of a few consulting firms which are like not American, like Roland Berger, for example,
Yeah.
but they also are trying to move into North America. So like, if you want to recruit for Roland Berger, you don't need to go to Europe for that. So I guess the kind of opportunities it offers in terms of jobs and also in terms of pay, like in my understanding, and I could be wrong, but in my understanding, consulting salaries are higher in US as compared to Europe or Southeast
Oh,
Asia.
yeah, significantly.
Yeah.
Also, like you're confusing doing an MBA with immigration. These two
Yep.
are not
Again,
the
same
same
thing. Yeah.
thing. your MBA doesn't have to be a path to living outside your home country. Like it's not the same thing. You're doing your MBA to like advance your career, get a better job, and maybe learn a few things that you didn't know before, meet some people from all over the world. So, and anyway, whatever your goal is, immigration should not be your goal. If immigration is your goal, then yeah, business schools in Canada, Australia, Europe makes a lot more sense. But
True.
dude, like you're not gonna get the jobs you're gonna get in an American business school. Like it is what it is. So, I mean, unless I think the couple schools like that are international make sense to me. Things like INSEAD, I think
Yeah.
INSEAD is just as good. LBS is very very good, but that's pretty much it. I mean, I'm at the end of the line here. Ranjan, what do you think?
I think exactly like as you said, apart from INSEAD and LBS, I would prefer a US school
Yeah,
any day over a school in another country. And the biggest reason, like from my experience, I wanted to be in tech. And if I want to be in tech, I want to be in a country, or like I want to work in a company which is like pushing the boundaries of innovation, where all the innovation is happening.
right,
And I see those opportunities in the US, right? Like I can
Yeah.
go work at
Exactly.
Google's head office or like Amazon's head office in Seattle, and
sure,
uh, I'm getting those opportunities where I will be working in at the forefront of all the tech innovation that's happening in the world, right?
right,
So that was my biggest push towards going to US over, let's say, Europe or yeah,
yeah,
any other country.
yeah. Awesome. Okay, almost at the end of the sessions, but just checking if there are any questions that we are missing. I'm trying to find your consulting question, Avinav.
Yeah, I was somewhere up there.
Somebody said he had to leave for H1. I'm sorry that happened. That happens to people. Uh, I love that Ranjan is hoping for sanity to prevail after 16 election, Brexit, and haircut protests. Okay, I have too many questions, so I'm gonna check this one. B school statement placement stats vary roughly from 93. We almost have 115 people watching, so it's going to be a little bit difficult to see your questions, all of them. But we're going to try to see if I missed anything. What happens to those 3% and 8% students? Do international students end up jobless? Can you share some idea about? Well, I wish you had finished that question. Anyway, so I think those things are reported placements. So a lot of people don't participate in surveys. A lot of people start their own jobs, and a lot of people go back, and a lot of people come sponsored. So those are all sets. But I would say though, like ballpark, and you guys can disagree. Ballpark, I've seen in a class of like 400, 500, where maybe like there's a group of like 30, 40 Indian students. I've seen like one or two having issues. I think that's the ballpark that I've seen. But I don't know if you guys have seen things differently.
I think that number is exactly right for our class. And I have a friend in Stern, I believe Stern 2020 is also in the same situation with only one or two people still looking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But
it's probably consistent across all like let's say
yeah,
5 to 15 ranked business schools.
Maybe one more question. Not sure if you guys want to chime in. Is Canada any closer to the US with respect to placements?
was that mean like Canadian schools or like
Yeah.
um I think so. I mean, I have one or two friends who went to schools in Canada and they got pretty good jobs. But like I mentioned, like in terms of the opportunities you can get in the US, that's unmatched. And
Yeah,
even
it's
in terms of
priceless. It's like
y-
massive.
yeah, and in terms of salaries, again, there's a big difference.
Yeah.
It is, and also like, look, I mean, Canada. I think if you're trying to live in Canada, like, yeah, man, that's a great option. But if not, then think about this. Not only you will, let's say you want to live in Canada, but you're not sure about where you want to end up staying, and let's say you want to go back to India, or go back to wherever you want, or go back to some island in New Zealand, whatever. In Canada, the tax rate is very high. If and you only reap the benefits of the taxes you pay if you choose to live long, like if you have children who go to schools, or if you have healthcare. So like you end up saving a lot more money in a place where you pay taxes the least. And America has some like the lowest taxes among most developed nations. So if you go to Europe, you're going to be taxed like mercilessly. Same for Canada. So think about those things before you make that decision. Anyway, so we are definitely out of time. Last thoughts. Ranjan, let's start with you. Do you have any last thoughts of what people should be doing? What should they be looking at before deciding on business school?
I think the overall criteria that probably one needs to think about is definitely the opportunity cost, as you pointed out. What
Yeah,
are you doing back in India? Is that significant enough? Are you earning a really good pay back in your home countries if it's India or something else? What's the opportunity cost? And you have to weigh those against the probable benefits and the kind of experience that you're going to get and the
right.
kind of opportunities that might be open to you. As a personal experience, I can definitely say that coming to the US and being here along with the class was a, a really defining experience of my life, so to say. And I'm not talking about the financial upsides and the quantifiable upsides that you talk about, the investment in the fee and the ROI you get in the next 5 years, and like I'll pay back the loan in like next 3 to 5 years, etc. Apart from all of that, I think the personal development, the kind of friends and the network and the experience that you get, you cannot quantify it easily, but it's I think that's my biggest takeaway from my MBA, the kind of people that I'm, you know having in my life. Like I have like few good friends, I have like amazing network that I can like leverage later on. Plus, I can see a growth in my personality, my perspective, how I see things, how I'm able to communicate. So all of those things are not necessarily quantifiable, but they are a huge plus, which probably would set you up to take on those leadership roles later in life. So evaluate that in as well. I'm not sure if you can evaluate that in a very quantifiable manner, but that's probably my biggest takeaway, and I can say that on behalf of like a few of my friends
No,
as well.
yeah, I totally agree. I mean, those are intuitive factors. So you can put heuristics on them. You can use your gut feeling, but it's so important to have to take those things into account.
Yeah.
Last thoughts, Avinav?
Yeah, I'll keep it specific to like post school career. And so, I mean, most people, like when they're preparing the MBA essays, they have to write about what they want to do about after school. So sometimes that's realistic and exactly what they want to do, but sometimes we like mine wasn't. Mine was completely
Yeah,
something else. So I mean, before coming to school or before even maybe deciding which school you want to go to, invest a lot of time figuring out what you really want to do, consulting, tech, whatever it may be, and then start connecting with people in those schools, like current students or very recent alumni. Like ask them like very precise question in terms of, okay, I'm interested in these 20, 30 companies. Do they come to your school? Are there any companies I'm missing out on in terms of international sponsorship? What's the situation? So that you have a very clear and transparent picture in terms of what you can expect once you reach school. Because recruitment starts like literally day one.
yeah.
It's not that you get a 3 month honeymoon period, just relax, go party, and then we'll talk about like getting a job. It starts
Building
like as
a
soon as you get there.
relationship.
Yeah, so like be very very clear about what you want to do after schools. And if you don't have an answer, that means you need to start connecting with people, and these people could be, like I said, current students, recent alumni, or like people who are already established in jobs you see yourself doing 3 years 5 years down the line.
Yeah. Well, awesome. By the way, quick announcement: we're doing MBA Spotlight starting this Monday. I think the first three schools on day one are Wharton, Tuck, and UCLA Anderson. So join us for that. Monday starts at 7 a.m. Pacific. I think you guys will be getting an email Sunday night with all the links, but all the links are on GMath Club right now. So go check it out. It's going to be a pretty big event. So I'm expecting a ton of people, and I'll be there too. Awesome. Well, thank you, Avinav, Ranjan, for joining. Like the video if you want us to get ahead of YouTube's algorithm. Subscribe to the channel if you want to get notified of the videos. But I hope you guys come again soon. This was great. We had like over 120 people and lots of good questions. Yeah, have a great time. And Ranjan, of course, I'll see you soon. And Avinav, I'll talk to you soon.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay,
There's a
thank
lot
you.
of unanswered questions. I can see if you have any questions, you can like connect me or Abhinav on LinkedIn or
Yeah, yeah.
drop us
Don't hesitate.
emails.
My
Oh yeah.
LinkedIn is full of like connect requests. Yeah, but go to these guys. That's great.
Yeah. I'm happy to
Yeah,
answer
happy
this
to
question
answer.
like
Yeah,
later offline. Like if you can like email me or drop
Yeah.
me a connection
But
request.
the names are on the screen. Avinav Sinha. Find them on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I can I can put the email in the comment section, but I would rather not do that. Like putting your email in this weird internets is a little bit tricky. But I think LinkedIn works well. Just find them. They both go to Michigan Ross. They're both starting awesome jobs very soon. And both gonna be really busy really soon. So I think this is the ideal time to like get time
Yeah.
from them.
cool.
Awesome. Thanks guys for joining. I'll see you guys soon.
All
Yeah.
right, thank you.
Perfect. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye,
Bye bye.
guys.